So welcome back to another episode, and yes, the title of this was The Best Video Game Magazine. And I'm talking about one magazine, not the entire run of the magazine. My favorite video game magazine of all time is Die Hard Game Fan. Without question, that is the best video game magazine I've ever read in my entire life. The best of the best. And then after that was EGM. EGM was also very good. And then after that was Game Players. And this magazine was usually hit or miss, mostly miss, but with one particular issue in January 1990, it was like everything to me. I loved this video game magazine, and I wanted to talk about it for a while because there is so much great stuff in here. And I'm just going to show it. Yes, it's a Game Pro. It's a Game Pro. You're like, oh my god, seriously? I know Game Pros were so miss back in the day, but this particular one in the early days of video game magazines was unreal. Now, there was also, for honorable mention, another great Game Pro, and that, look at this one here. This is Volume 1, Number 2. This is issue number 2 of Game Pro. Look at the back there. It's got the Metal Gear ad for the NES, but why I like this original magazine, look at this. This is so nostalgically fantastic for all the old timers out there and people who are just interested. They showed the Mega Drive and the PC Engine for the very first time. And, you know, they showed the PC Engine here, and I was like, oh my god, credit card sized video games, I'm in. And so that was the very first time I ever saw these, and I was like, okay, Game Pro's pretty good. And then issues after issues are not very good. And then I got this one here. And we're going to go through it today. I have a bit of a nostalgic ride into 1990. And we'll start off with the first thing that we see here is the beautiful advertisement for the Sunsoft Batman on the NES. It's still up there as one of my favorite Batman games, but I love the Arkham and all that stuff now, but this, when I first played this game, I couldn't believe the animation at that time, the character animation, and I thought they got the Gotham City, the moodiness of it, perfect, and so that was a great way to start off. And I just want to show a few things here. The one thing I want to say about this controller, what I really liked is, he goes, be there with the magic of sound. This was an NES controller, and you could plug headphones into it. And so that's a big deal, but that was kind of a big deal back then. And I was like, oh my god, I could play the NES and not annoy my parents? That's what I was thinking. I was trying to be a good kid back then, honestly. And then an awesome advertisement for Shadowgate, one of my favorite games on the NES. Great soundtrack. What a memorable soundtrack that is. It's a bit of a exploration game, puzzle solving game. You know what? Why I like this magazine? It's the time period. Is every single advertisement I see in here, I'm like, oh my god, I want to talk about it. And I didn't even think I was going to do that when I first started talking about this magazine, because there's a few games that I want to get to in here. But look at that, Go-Go 13. That was a great. I know it's not a great game, but it was a great game at that time. Like, it was kind of neat to play an anime-style side view beat-em-up game based on a manga. Even I knew what that was back 28 years ago. And we're gonna get to I get stopped all the time. The Wicked Fantasy of Willow. A great game on the NES, and overhead action RPG by Capcom based on the movie Willow. Love it. I just didn't like the main character. I like Willow in the movie, but I just thought the main character looked so kind of crappy in this game. I was like, I want Mad Mardigan. That's who I wanted. Okay. This is where the excitement started to build up for me. I talked about, obviously, the TurboGrafx on here and the CD and all that stuff for years. Maybe even too much. But you know what? I had to show this because this was, I think, one of the very first right here, very first editorials on the TurboGrafx, getting into detail about what it could do and how it could play CD games, but it could also play CDs with graphics on them. This was amazing stuff back then. And this right here, the bottom, was the very first place I'd ever seen Fighting Street. Up close, I was like, wait a second. I played that in the arcade, and it's out on CD, and it's coming out for the TurboGrafx CD. I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna have Street Fighter 1. That was that was amazing at the time. So I was getting very hyped for the TurboGrafx at this point. I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit here. This is so classic. Seeing these old advertisements back then. Take on the titles that will blow you away. Well, you know what? That did blow you away. Back in 1990, we got Fester's Quest, which was really good. Platoon, Batman Blaster Master, and the great overhead shooting game of Spy Hunter. It's kind of a racing game where you play like a spy in this car, shooting other cars. It was amazing at the time. It really, really was. We got some Double Dragon 2 going on. That was always amazing. Here, this is the one I want to talk about. On the Master System, I remember I read this, I think, 1,000 times over. And the reason why is this was on the Master System, and it was like a side view action RPG, and there wasn't a lot of those back then. And anything that had the word RPG in it, I was into it, and it seemed so fascinating, and you know, kind of like with ancient Japanese lore, but with science fiction elements. And the funny thing is I had my friend Andrew over a few years ago, and we finished the game. And we never captured any footage or anything like that. We played it for ourselves because it was one of those games I saw back 28 years ago, and then at that time, like 27 years later, I finally got to play it. And it's kind of a precursor to Mystic Defender, for sure. And then look at this. Here, we got Golden Axe here. This is like previews for Golden Axe. And it's just like Golden Axe on the Genesis, which was like a huge, big deal. I played it in the arcade, and I was like, we get Golden Axe at home? These were the times. That's what this was all about. Here's a game I still have never, I think I turned it on one time on emulation. I never had it, none of my friends did, and I always wanted it. And that was Rambo 3 on the Genesis. I liked some of the cutscenes, and it just looked fun to play as Rambo. Rambo was the coolest character ever. So to play him in a Genesis game, oh, for sure. Oh, here we go. Thunder Force 2. This was a really big overhead and also side view shooting game on the Genesis. And I told the story a very long time ago where, this is great, where I got the game just after Christmas. I got the game and I went home and I skipped school one particular day. I told this story, maybe it's nearly 9 years ago I told this story. So a lot of you, it'll be a little bit new to you. But I skipped school and I went home and I was so scared of my parents coming home and busting me playing Thunder Force that I had a stupid little black and white television that I put into my closet, okay? And I went into the closet and I hooked everything up through RF back then. This was not nice looking stuff. And I was playing Thunder Force on a black and white TV, and I had my headphones in because the Genesis had a headphone jack. And I'm in the closet and I closed the closet. And then I've told this, I don't know why, but my sister came home. Like she was at work or something like that, and she came home and she was looking for something in the house. Still to this day, I don't know what it was. And she decided to come into my room to go into my closet. So she opens up the closet, and I'm like sitting there playing Thunder Force, and I'm busted playing it. I'm like, ah! I was like so like scared. I was like shocked that I got busted. And so as I said in the original story, I pleaded with my sister to not tell my parents. I'm like, don't tell my parents. Don't tell our parents that I skipped school to play this game. What does she do? She's like, oh no, I won't tell them. And she goes and tells them. That's just why me and my sister were never close when we were younger. She always told on me for everything, even for playing Thunder Force 2 in the closet. I love it. It's good. This 2-page spread right here I'm looking at, it just, small tear, brings me back to simpler days. Oh, wow. So right here on this side, this is the big advertisement for the TurboGrafx. Look at the advertisement in the 80s and, late 80s, early 90s here. It was just like, not a great way to really show it off, but it was fascinating showing all the different games and the controller and the CD add-on and the power booster and stuff like that. But, it's kind of, I think for a lot of people, it probably confused them. One thing that I was not confused about, though, was Dungeon Explorer. on the TurboGrafx. This was a gauntlet-style overhead game with great music. I told it so many times, the worst box art in the history of box arts. Besides one of those Master System games, that wrestling one was terrible. But this was a great game. You needed the multi-tap for it to plug in 4 controllers. You could have 4 friends playing together on the screen at one time. Pure RPG heaven. And I always remember the beginning of the game had the parallax scrolling, and I was like, oh my god, this is good, this is amazing. And it really was a great game, but it was over so very, very fast. And I remember reading this the article over and over and over again. This page here is forever burned into my brain because I read it so much. It meant so much to me. The excitement level was building. It was unreal. And oh my, this is great stuff. The advertisements in video game magazines were great. Bring an Amazon woman home to meet mom. I wonder if that kind of thing would fly nowadays. Somebody would get upset about it. Introducing Golden Axe, and look at that. I like how they showcase the game on a CRT monitor back then, and now they're showing the power-based converter over here, which is great. And this, I must admit, the advertisements for the Genesis were sleek and amazing, just like the machine itself, and they're showing all the games at the bottom there. And here's the thing. The advertisements were so good, I wanted every single game. I didn't even care if it was a genre that I wasn't into. Even like basketball games, like, look at all this stuff here. Arnold Palmer Tournament Golf. I wanted to play it. Space Harrier 2, obviously. Super Hang-On, yes, definitely wanted that. World Championship Soccer. Tommy Lasorda Baseball. Whenever I hear the name Tommy Lasorda Baseball, I always think back to the Genesis. Every single thing back then was awesome. And here's something else from before the internet. In the back of some of these magazines were pro tips. Little hints and all the codes of different games. How to get extra continues, how to start at certain levels. These were very, very important things. It was like, oh my god, I can get infinite continues in a game. I learned about a lot of these through these video game magazines. Like even like Alex Kidd there. I learned a lot from reading that. Unbelievable. Yeah, look at this. Look at all these tips. On Altered Beast on the Master System, on the certain codes you could enter in Castlevania to start you off, in a better position. Last Battle, this is the one I remember. This is like the Fist of the North Star game on the Genesis. Kind of a side view action game. This was showing you how to continue from the last chapter, because back then you played through the entire game, and then if you died, you had to start right from the beginning. So these things were a big deal to find out the code, how to restart from the last chapter, so you didn't have to do all of that legwork again, which was just absolutely crazy. And look at some ease tips there on the Master System version. This was a great video game magazine. I love this. And then we get to this thing. We get to this part here. I love this section in GamePro back then. This is the one thing I did like. Overseas prospects. They were talking about a lot of games that were in Japan, and maybe they would come over here. Maybe. And with this one, it didn't. It never came over here. It did on the Super Nintendo, but they were talking about the PC Engine version of the arcade classic, the Ninja Warriors. And I've talked about this a lot. In the arcade, it was 3 screens. It was amazing technology at the time. And then this was the PC Engine version. I was like, oh my god, this is what I was just reading about. This PC Engine is going to be, unbelievable. Here's some more on it there. And so I read this. I think this is what I used to do back then. I probably read this like 10 times. It was just unreal, like over and over and over again. And what's funny about the game is that, yes, we got the Super Nintendo version, which is a great game. I love it. And we're going to get a remake of that game. But if you didn't have emulation and you didn't have the Sega CD from Japan, because you can get the Mega CD version of this game over there, which was the best version of it. Took 28 years, but on PSN now, PlayStation Network, you can download the original arcade game, which I highly recommend for like $14. It's a side view action game, wave after wave of enemies. You're trying to destroy a dictator. You're a robot, kind of Terminator, dressed up as a ninja. You have ninja abilities. You throw shurikens. This is how great the 80s were. It was awesome. I was just reading about this and I was like, I want this on the TurboGrafx. I want this so bad, and they never ever brought this out over here, which is so unfortunate. But as I say, for an official version of it, not an emulated version of it, it took 28 years to get an official version of the Ninja Warriors. That's sometimes how some of this stuff works, and what a great thing. And just we're near the end of the magazine here, just looking at all of the games coming. Hey, there's Mystic Defender. There's the kind of the sequel to Spellcaster we're looking at, and they're showing R-Type there. R-Type was a great game on the TurboGrafx, and Forgotten Worlds by Capcom, an arcade shooting game being ported to the Genesis. And even at the top here, we get Dragon Spirit. I remember walking with a friend of mine in the rain. I don't know why. Isn't it weird the stupid things you remember? I remember we were walking home in the rain, and he was the only other person in high school that I remember who had a TurboGrafx. And we're walking home, and he's like, oh yeah, I have Dragon Spirit. And I'm like, really? I said, I gotta come over and play it. I said, I gotta trade it for you. And he borrowed it to me. And I always remember walking in the rain talking about Dragon Spirit. How bizarre is that? My brain is bizarre beyond reality. It really, really is. And this is just the last thing I'm gonna hit on here. What a great way to end. Look at all these things for the wizard. All these, look at this. All the different items you could buy from the hot new Universal movie. You could get all this merchandise. You could get hats and lunch kits, shirts. You can get water bottles. You can get watches. I mean, this merchandise now, that is really neat to see, and that's also from a very different time. And oh, one last thing. It's funny because we've forgotten how scoring in video games was a really big deal back then. I never tried to get a high score, and very much it wasn't about high scores for me. It was really just about enjoying the game. But look at this entire section just on high scores and who's got the biggest high score in the world, kind of thing at that time, or who had sent in their thing. And then the lists here you could order all the games from different stores and things like that. People who had taken out advertisements in the magazine and stuff like that. And oh, there you go, the good old Tengen ad on the back of the magazine, showing a different time when games were, these were all realistically, a lot of these were arcade games being ported to the NES with mixed results. But I gotta say something here. I really enjoyed doing this episode and talking about this magazine. It's one of those ones that I've had it sitting on the shelf over here that I've wanted to talk about for a very long time. And because it's kind of close to Christmas, I was like, this is the perfect time to talk about this. And that was January 1990. Quite literally, nearly, it's 28, but it's going to be like 29 years ago. And I still remember that magazine so well, and it's amazing. It's all these years later. I'm looking at it again. So anyways, guys, until next time.